Okay, here we go. Chapter 5-1, page 340. 340. The blue box on this page is essential. You must memorize. You may put on a note card until test. Yes. No. I don't know. Could you imagine if my board broke? How would you keep up with me on those? We would have class. We would have class. It crumbles. It crumbles. It crumbles.
Oh, it's not even on that. It is up there.
Okay. Now, what's on that page? Here's what's on that page. Identities, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Sine squared u plus cosine squared u is equal to 1. 1 plus tangent squared u is equal to secant squared. 1 plus cotangent squared u is equal to cosecant squared u. And x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. You have all this down already. You should have this all in a note card already, true? Yeah, notice that's all what we have so far. Now, next thing, trig identities. Remember I talked about whenever you have one trig identity, this is the original one. When you have one identity, you immediately have two more. I'm recording. I'm recording. Okay? Do we get this? Yes? You only have to write down the 3 original identities because the other ones are there. Even and odd functions, again, something you need to remember. This should already be on your note card also, okay? That's the bottom of that page. Another thing are the cofunctions. That's also on that page, okay? And the next thing is one of the problems we're going to start. For real. Tonight for homework. It doesn't matter. You're going to stay with me. Number 3. I wonder what that is. A magnet will do that? For real? Okay. It's not on my computer screen. It's only on my smartboard. Okay. Okay, the directions say, Use the given values to evaluate, if possible, all 6 trigonometric functions. All 6 trigonometric functions. Number 3, they give you the secant of theta is equal to the square root of 2, and that the sine of theta is equal to negative square root of 2 over 2. Okay? So first of all, you have some information here, don't you? You know that the sine is positive, or I'm sorry, that the sine is negative, and that the cosine is what? Secant is understood to be 1 over cosine, correct? Do we all understand that? And since the secant is positive, that would imply that the cosine is positive. So that means my cosine is positive, my sine is negative. What quadrant am I in? I am in, I am in quad 2. Do we all understand that? No, I'm not. Jeez, people. Good, Pete. Why do I listen to you guys? Positive, negative. We're in quad 4. Right? We are in quad 4. The sine is negative. The cosine is positive. Do we get that? Yes or no? Now, I need to find all 6 trig functions according to the information that I have up there. Well, what could I do to find all the things? The point here is you guys can go many different ways about doing this because it's trig. You can use the identity, sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1, and find out what cosine is. Okay? Or you can understand that secant is 1 over cosine, which means that this is going to be 1 over the square root of 2. I'm sorry. This is the square root of 2, which means that the cosine is the reciprocal of this to give you 1 over the square root of 2. Do we understand that? Yes or no? Now, the question was, should we keep it like that? Do you really think I'm going to like that? So we have the cosine of theta is the square root of 2 over 2. Rationalized. Right? Right? You with me? We know that the secant is the square root of 2. We know that the sine they gave us to be negative square root of 2 over 2. So then we also know what the cosecant is. Negative 2 over the square root of 2, which turns out to be negative 2 square root of 2 over 2 to give you just negative square root of 2. Do we see that, yes or no? Right? Do we all see the rationalized form of it? The last thing that you need to find out is going to be the tangent. I could use the trig identity, or I could just use the concept that it's x over y, correct? Or sine over cosine, correct? Do we all understand that? Okay? So with that said, that's going to be negative square root of 2 over 2 times the reciprocal. Do we all see that? To give you negative 1. Which means what is going to be the cotangent? Still negative 1. Yes. You should know a lot of things by now. I mean, seriously, you should know that tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent, which is x over y, which is going to be sine y over x, which is sine over cosine. You should know all of that, okay? Those are all, you should also know that this is the same thing as 1 over tangent, or cotangent, okay? Those are all things that we covered in Chapter 4 that are absolutely in your brain. Yes, you should also know that tangent, given this, that tangent is going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of secant squared minus 1. That's another definition of tangent, because that's given off of what? It's right off of your identity. That's another definition your brain should immediately go to. Do we understand that? Okay? So my point is there's a whole bunch that you could also use the cotangent definition. Okay? All right, that is like problems. This right here is like problems 1 through 10, 14. 1 through 14. Like problems 1 through 14, okay? Then, the next thing that you need to know is number 15. The directions say, in exercises 15 through 20, match the trigonometric expression with one of the following. Everybody's on page 345, correct? Page 345. Might be wise to bring your books to class when you come in, especially when you're late. Page 345, we ready? Okay, notice they give you A through F. A through F, A is secant of x, B is -1, C is cotangent of x, D is 1, and E is negative tangent of x, and the last one is sine of x. They give you problems. The problems that they give you, you have to simplify down. It's just the heating unit, the air conditioning unit. Now, secant of x times the cosine of x. What do I have to do? What do I know? Chapter 4, what do you know? What is secant? 1 over cosine. And what happens to my cosines? They cancel out and it equals 1. What letter is 1? It is letter D. That's what you have to write down. It's very easy, right? Okay, number 18. 1 minus cosine squared of x is equal to cosecant of x. This is where your brain starts to say, oh no, I need to recognize something, and you absolutely should be recognizing something. What looks funny out of that entire problem on number 18? I'm sorry? The parentheses is 1 unit. This is one entity together. Your brain needs to recognize that as something. And what is it? It absolutely is an identity. More importantly, what identity has that 1 and cosine squared in it? What identity has the 1 and the cosine squared in it? It's the most simplest one you have. The sine squared of theta plus the cosine squared of theta is equal to 1. Now, I need my 1 and my cosine squared on the same side, so what would I have to do? I have to subtract the cosine squared. So sine squared of theta is equal to 1 minus the cosine squared of theta. Do we understand that every place I see this, I can plug in what for it? I can plug in sine squared of theta. Does that make sense? It's no different than saying Chris and Christopher. Okay? They are the same. Okay? With that said, I can plug in what there now. So this is going to be sine squared theta, or x, sorry, times the cosecant of x. And now your brain needs to say, well, can we get everything in one term? And the terms are going to be your trig functions, sine, cosine, secant, cosecant, tangent, cotangent. So what would we do with this? Sine squared stays because that is as simple as it's going to get. Cosecant becomes 1 over the sine. Now, that is gone, and the squared is gone, and what am I left with? I'm left with just sine of x. What letter is sine of x? Letter F. Do we understand this? Okay, what was the question again? Are you good? Okay. No, it was not. Do we understand number 18? Now, that section is like 15 through 20. These are like problems 15 through 20. Do we understand what they want you to do for problems 15 through 20? Yes or no? We good? All right, now, the last section that I'm going to talk about is number 23. Now, for problems 21 through 26, it says match the trigonometric expression with one of the following. It's exactly the same thing, but instead of doing sine and cosines and secants and cosecants, now what are they throwing in there in this set of instructions? They're throwing in their tangents and cotangents and secants and all this lovely little junk. Okay? Same exact thing. Do not let it freak you out. You're simply going to break it down and say, okay, what can I do with this? I want you to think way, way, way back in the day in Algebra 1 and again in Algebra 2. What did you say? It's not FOIL, but it's the opposite of FOIL, which would be what? Factoring. Your brain was going there, you just couldn't say it correctly, okay? Yes, we want to factor this thing. So I have secant to the fourth of x. So how can I break that down into two binomials? And I need to write more space in here. This is going to be secant squared of x. And this is going to be secant squared of x. Do you remember that? Yes or no? Do you remember breaking it down evenly? The next thing we looked at was going to be the nice little sign in the middle of the two. I need a negative outcome. So how do you get a negative outcome? Your signs have to be opposite, so one has to be plus and one has to be minus. How do I break down secant, or I should say tangent to the fourth? Tangent squared, and then what else? Tangent squared. Excellent. Okay, now your brain should be having alarms going off. Why? What? You could break them down more. You could technically. Only one of them breaks down. The one that breaks down is going to be the second one over here. You could factor that further, okay? But your brain should be making alarms first because it should be going right back to what we learned in Chapter 4. Anybody remember? We just used it on the last problem. It is an identity. Which identity is it? What identity deals with sine squareds and tangent squareds? 1 plus tangent squared of theta is equal to secant squared of theta. Okay? Now, can you tell me, in my problem that I have previously, where are my secant squareds and my tangent squareds and my 1s located? I don't have any 1s, do I? Okay, so where are my secant squareds and my tangent squareds? They're together on one side. So I need to bring that tangent squared over. So where do I bring that? So I'm going to have 1 is equal to my secant squared of theta minus my tangent squared of theta. Do we all see that? This is yet another representation of the identity. Do we see that? So now every place I see secant squared theta minus tangent squared theta, I can substitute what value in for it? 1. So I go back over to my lovely little example here, and this whole entire thing turns into a 1. Do we see that? Yes or no? And what I have is secant squared of x plus tangent squared of x is what I have it simplified down to. Okay? Now, could I change again? Don't I know what secant squared is? Okay, let's back up a minute. How do I know I'm not done? How do I know I'm not done? I'm matching, right? So let's go to 21 through 26. Do I have any letter, 21 through 26, that will give me secant squared plus tangent squared? What letter is it? It is letter F. But I'm going to tell you something. That is the correct answer, okay? Could I simplify it further down? Because I could say that secant squared is going to be 1 plus tangent squared. Isn't it? Isn't that another form of it? How many tangent squareds do you have up there? I have 2 of them. do you see that these are all equivalent? Now, the box on top is what they have for you to look for. Do we understand that? Would you be wrong if you went down this far? You wouldn't be wrong if I were to give that to you on a test. But whenever they're matching it, you have to look for what you have. So letter F would be the correct answer. Do we all understand that? Okay. Now, tonight's homework is 1 through 13 odd. Now, the reason why I did 1 through 13 odd is because it's asking for all 6 trig functions. Do you all understand that? So I reduced the amount of your work tremendously, correct? 15 through 26 you are doing all because it's the matching part. Do we all understand that? The homework tonight is not difficult. Okay, I've showed you how to do every type of problem. The 1 through 13 odd most definitely stems from Chapter 4. Now, I'm not going to tell you guys this again. This is my last time over Chapter 5. Page 340 is the most essential page that you need to remember and memorize. Because the more you memorize that blue box, the easier your math is going to be for you. It's going to take less time because you're going to recognize what to plug in where and what to substitute. This is a whole bunch of Williams, Bill, Willie, all of those things. All those substitutions that you can put in for one person. That's what trig is now. You're getting into the heart and soul of it. Do you all understand me? So memorize that box. Tomorrow, notebooks are due over Chapter 4. Am I clear? We will move on to the rest of 5-1 tomorrow. I will get them.